Welcome to the Perfect Pairing Podcast. This week, the cigar of the week is the Casa Cuevas Patrimonio.
But before we get to that, if you don't know us, my name is Chris, and I am the whiskey expert and the cigar noob.
And my name is Adam, and I am the cigar expert and the whiskey noob.
And today we're finding the perfect pairing for this Casa Cuevas Patrimonio, which I'm excited to try because I've never tried it before. And we've also got a few whiskeys that are going to be treats today. I'm actually really excited to dig into the different whiskeys that we've got. I took an early taste, I won't lie, and I'm excited.
Well, we've got one that, correct me if I'm wrong, not a lot of people, is it out there yet?
It is out there, if I'm not mistaken, but very difficult to get your hands on. But should be very unique, which is why I'm really excited to try it with a cigar, because this will probably be one of the most unique whiskeys we've had with a cigar in terms of what they've done to finish it.
I was thinking the same thing. I was looking at it, and obviously the way that it is packaged, it just makes it feel like, ooh, like I'm getting something that's some secret sauce here. So
Right.
you guys are gonna have
Right.
to wait to the end to see what it is. Sorry about it. Not sorry. Whatever.
And you'll
So
also have to wait till the end to hear the answer to the trivia. It's my turn this week.
your turn
Is
this
it?
week. I get to
All right.
relax, sit back, and light up.
Lucky for you, I thought about it between recording here right beforehand. I was like, okay, what's this week's episode gonna be, or this week's trivia? Okay, I've got this is a low ball. This is a 101 for the guys who are already into whiskey, but for those who
Oh
don't know
crap.
anything about whiskey, this is probably new information. So, for bourbon, Scotch, Irish whiskey, and actually a bunch of other ones, but let's stick with bourbon, Scotch, and Irish whiskey. What is the minimum proof level or percent ABV, whichever one you prefer to use, that qualifies it to be legally considered a bourbon or a Scotch or an Irish whiskey? It's the same for all three of them.
Crickets.
Crickets. Okay, that's good. No, that's good.
And in case you guys don't know who I am, I'm Adam, and I'm the whiskey noob.
You're right. You know what's tough is I never know how hard they're going to be, because my wife has picked up so much of this just from me talking and from listening to me edit videos that I'm like, oh, this must be like mostly common knowledge. And it's like, no, it's not. She just knows it because she listens to me constantly ramble about it.
Yeah, I'm sure my wife would be the same on the cigar side. I'm very intrigued. I don't want to toss out my guess, or maybe I should. I don't know. I know we've done
If
that
you're
in the
not
past.
sure, I say
Why
throw the
not?
guess out there. I
I'll
won't
throw
tell
it
you if
out
you're
there.
right.
I'm thinking it's 40% uh, alcohol, but maybe I'm thinking between 30 and 40, or
All
it's
right.
between 1 and 100. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna play it safe. If I can play the spread, I'm playing the spread.
Fair enough. It's certainly between 0 and 100% alcohol by volume.
So it's not a trick question, everybody, because Chris likes those, and then we all feel stupid.
I am a fan of trick questions, and I am still terrible at lighting cigars. I think I need a better lighter. You see, I got this giant one because it has this giant capacity, but it also has a pretty big flame on it. It's really hard to control. I think I need to get
Yeah,
a smaller one.
I think I know a guy.
Yeah. Yeah, you might have a couple lighters. I just saw your Instagram post about it the other day.
Did you? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
dude.
think I have like 60.
Oh my gosh. That's insane.
I mean, see, we just so everybody knows out there, Chris and I are just gonna have a conversation, so you guys can log off. Like, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But no, like we talked about this before Chris and I partnered up. I was like, "You have how many bottles of whiskey?" And he was like, "You have how many cigars?" And we were like, "This is gonna be a great partnership." You're gonna
Yes.
have endless amounts of cigars now, and I'm gonna have endless amounts of whiskey, and this is the greatest partnership that has probably led to unemployment that anybody's ever seen.
Right. It's a perfect pair is what it is.
Oh, it's almost like we thought of it.
That's just so poetic. All right, so pairing number one, great cork pop.
Oh yeah.
Pop. Pairing number one we've got here. We've had it on the show before, if I'm not mistaken. We've got Redwood Empire's Lost Monarch. We had a blend last episode. We've got another blend this episode. This is a blend of straight whiskeys, which is a blend of not just bourbon, but also rye whiskeys, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, bourbon and rye whiskey. This is coming in first because it's got a little bit of that rye spice, but it's also kind of sweet and kind of mellow. And I think the other two are going to have a bit different of a body to them that I didn't want to influence the mellowness of this Lost Monarch. So that's why it's coming first.
Can you remind me, Chris, if you've got it handy, what cigar we had it with?
Great question. I do have it handy. Let me look at our previous
I'm trying to throw
pairings
off
here.
your ash here. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make you look like a cigar noob, so the smoke is going in and out, and you don't have the right consistency in smoking. I'm trying to make you look like a cigar noob.
Yeah, fair enough. It doesn't take much. You can look at my initial light. It wasn't great, so I'll need to adjust a little bit. Whoops. Like I said,
Everybody
I need to
has
get a different lighter.
somewhere, guys. Chris just
That's
is behind
true.
you.
Yeah. There's no shame here. I'm a cigar noob. That's for sure. I have not mastered the light yet, especially not on camera. That's like extra difficult.
It is extra difficult because you got to point it at the camera. Like if you're doing this, you can't see it. You're like lighting and you can't see it.
Exactly.
Just so everybody knows out there, while Chris is looking this up, this Casa Cuevas Patrimonio, the way Chris and I, if you guys are curious on how to say it, Chris and I talked about it before we went on. It's like matrimony, patrimonio, matrimony, and it means heritage, and that's because Casa Cuevas, House of Cuevas. It's the Cuevas family that makes this cigar. And if I'm not mistaken, Alec Cuevas, who is the next generation on the lineage of Cuevas in the tobacco world here, Alec had a big hand in putting this cigar together. So he's in his early stages of training, and we wanted to kind of pay homage to him and his family today with the Patrimonio.
Yeah, and I did get that light corrected a little bit, so we're gonna see how well this cigar corrects itself. This is gonna be a really great example. You guys saw how terrible my initial light was, so I'm gonna touch it a little bit, but we're gonna see how much it corrects itself. We had the Lost Monarch with the J.C. Newman Nika Reserva. That was the episode that came out on April 1st. Is what we had that with.
This is going to be interesting. This cigar is definitely a little heavier than that one. I wouldn't say it's going to be overwhelmingly heavier. It's not a dark Maduro, as you guys can see, especially if you're in the Perfect Pairing Club and you're smoking it, hopefully, while you're listening to us. But I think it's going to do better. Here's something I want you to look at, Chris, if you can find it. The ratings, don't look it up now, but the rating that I had specifically, at least, on the Lost Monarch, I'm going to guess right now, before we go into it, that this one's going to pair better.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not even going to look what I put. That way it's extra not biased because I have no idea what to expect from this pairing. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And then we'll compare to the last pairings. All right. Let's dive in with this Lost Monarch. I haven't had did you try it yet?
I just got into the pairing. It's a very playful pairing is what I'm going to say. I can't pinpoint exactly what's going on yet, but I do believe that I was right. I think it's a good pairing. That's my initial reaction. But trying to figure out exactly what's going on, I feel like this is one of those that's going to take a second. What about you?
Okay, I haven't taken a sip yet. I was getting a little bit of an idea for what this cigar tastes like. So I'll take a sip here in a second. Luckily, I know exactly what Lost Monarch tastes like. So mostly just going to be observing the cigar here. I'm also trying to hold it properly so it corrects itself, which so far it's getting there. It's starting to correct now.
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty early for everybody out there, and that's not a cigar expert. It's going to take a little time. I mean, it's not going to be, an automatic. It's not like a machine where it's like, shh. Okay, thin line. Here we go. Now burn even.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got all the parts with the touch up, and it looks like it is. So I think we're good.
Nice. I'm getting I'll start off here. I'm getting a very sweet note out of both. I think this is definitely a complementary pairing, in my opinion. I think the Lost Monarch is kind of shifting in a way, but on the cigar side, sweet, savory. I mean, just again, I don't want to overuse the term, but approachable. If you're, I think in this instance, if you're coming from the whiskey side and you're trying to get into cigars, this is a pairing that is going to be very, very good to get introduced into the cigar world.
I agree. This is interesting. The Lost Monarch, right off the bat, very sweet. It made it like a sweet, creamy vanilla. The cigar, I'm still getting accustomed to, but I think it cut back some of the black pepper, cut back a little bit of the spice, and brought out, like you said, that sweetness, made it more approachable. So so far an easy, just kind of nice pairing. Just kind of they just kind of make each other sweeter and nice.
I think this would be like a great happy hour pairing, is where I'm kind of like feeling this one. Like a Friday, I don't know how many of you guys go to cigar lounges, but you go to a cigar lounge on a Friday, like 3 o'clock, you get off a little early, maybe 4 o'clock. You're ready to start the weekend, but you don't want to start off too strong. This is a great, like, you're sitting there, it's sunny outside, not too hot, and you're just relaxing, lounging out, and having a good time, relaxing, letting all the stress a little pour off of you a little bit. That's the way I'm thinking of this pairing right here.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. The thing that is really interesting about this pairing, and I don't know if I've said this yet about any of our pairings, is that Lost Monarch. It is interacting with the cigar, like you said. It's pretty complementary. They're playing off each other. However, because the body of the Lost Monarch is so nice and light and just kind of easy, like if you take another puff and then like one more after that without sipping the Lost Monarch, you kind of get back to the normal cigar flavor. So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting. It's not like they're just changing and staying that way. It's like sip the Lost Monarch. Okay, the cigar is sweeter. One more puff. Okay, now it's got a little bit more body. One more puff. Okay, now that spiciness is back a little bit. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I would agree, and I'd almost agree on the same side as the Lost Monarch. Like if you take a couple puffs or whatever, and then you go back, or you wait a little while and you go to the Lost Monarch, then you have a sip or two. It kind of does a very similar situation, which is it's kind of a pairing that we haven't experienced before in that instance where they're playing and then they're like, all right, cool, man. I'm not in love with you. I wanted to hang out with you for a second, and then I wanted to just go do my own thing. So
Right. Yeah, they're giving each other room, which is really interesting. They're not permanently changing the flavor. Which with any pairing, if you just go back to just the whiskey for a long time, sure that happens, but this one it's a little bit more exaggerated. It's pretty interesting.
yeah, I'm gonna call it an open relationship.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what it's like.
It's like the cigar is like, I know there's more pairings coming along, but I mean, if you want to hang out again, we could totally, hang out.
Right. Speaking of which, let's bring in the next one. Uh, this next pairing that we've got, look at that packaging. Pretty sleek, right?
I had to keep
Yeah.
it in the packaging because I'm a big fan. I'm gonna do it for the side camera too. I'm a big fan of this packaging. It just, sometimes cigars are in tubes and sometimes whiskeys are in tubes. Same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that's cool about their bottles is it has this little logo on it. If I can get it off because I don't have any nails, it's a magnet. Ah, there we go. So it has this cool little like coin on it.
Oh,
Let me show it to the camera, show it to my side camera, and it's magnet. So it clicks onto there. It's pretty cool.
I did not even notice that when I took it out.
Yeah, and I haven't told people what it is yet, so my apologies for those on the audio version. So we are drinking um, from Virginia Distillery Company. We are drinking their Courage and Conviction American Single Malt, specifically their Cuvée Cask Finish. Now, we have had pretty good luck with single malts that have funky finishes. So I'm pretty excited to try this with the cigar. I don't really know. Like I said, I didn't have this cigar before, so I didn't know what to expect going into it. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, clearly, as everybody watched me open this bottle, I have not had this before. So this is a blind side for me to see what's going to happen with this cigar here. Question, you have some comments. You're already like curious here.
Yeah. Go ahead though.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you keep going, and I'm gonna give you a second because smelling the cork, isn't that a thing in wine? Is it a thing in bourbon too?
You know, it's one of those things I've seen people do, but I don't know that it's as much of a. I wonder if it's one of those things that people just do because they've seen it done with wine. So I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I can tell you personally, I don't get much from smelling the cork.
I didn't
But
get a whole lot there, so.
no, yeah, I mean, there's a reason we put it into these funky looking glasses. It's to make it easier to smell.
True.
But I have seen people do it, but I don't think it's really a thing.
Fair enough. Now to the pairing. You had a quite an odd face for those on the audio. Chris looked, as handsome as ever. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I right away, first puff, I took a puff and I took a sip, and this is sweet. This is delicate and complex, and just really it cut back on the maltiness and brought out that cuvee finish. Really interesting. And I still have some more work to do. I've only gone back and forth once or twice, but they're definitely also playing with each other a little bit.
So cuvee, what is a cuvee cask as a whiskey noob?
I want to say what it is, and I don't want to be wrong. Let me Google it, but
Okay.
I'll give my guess just to be honest, because cuvee is not a type of whiskey. I'll tell you that, and it's also not a cask that you get often or that I've got often. I
was gonna
think it's either a wine or I don't think it's a brandy. Actually, I think it's a
I
wine.
was thinking it sounded like a brandy, but
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is. What is cuvee? Okay, it's a French wine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that now. But yeah, it's interesting when you hear American single malt, this is not really where I would go immediately, and that must be the cuvee cask. I could see the wine kind of giving it that fruity flavor, that almost floral type of notes on the nose and on the finish.
Yeah. And I did try this before the cigar. I tried this like a few days ago, and it definitely, that cuvee cask is popping out more. It definitely is elevated by the cigar.
Now on the cigar side, I mean, it's a very interesting mix because we've got two sweet whiskeys here that are adding something different to the whiskey, or sorry, to the cigar.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'm looking up cuvee casks here, so I apologize if I'm looking down a lot, but I'm trying to. It might not specific. I don't think it's specifically not a type of wine. It's a type of cask that wine is aged in, actually.
Oh.
Which is, I've never had like a new type of cask before, so this is different for me.
Here we are experiencing new things for you guys. You guys don't need to do the work. We've talked about it. We're here for you. We'll struggle for you. We'll go through this whole process. And more importantly, bourbon and cigars, whiskey and cigars in general, they're both intimidating. We're going to look stupid here for you guys. So you guys don't need to look stupid in the lounge and the whiskey bar and wherever you guys are with your friends, on the golf course, in the back porch, whatever it is. We're going to look stupid, so you don't have to.
Exactly. No, you're totally right, dude. Anytime you talk with somebody who almost makes you feel stupid, odds are they don't know that much, but they have a leg up on you on whatever specific thing was just said, and they're like, I'm using it right now. Like, I'm using that to get my edge up on somebody. People who know a lot are so happy to teach you about it and so happy to talk about it. So don't ever feel stupid. And this is me having to eat crow a little bit. So it's a type of cask that wine is aged in, but this doesn't have wine aged in it. At least they don't say on their website, Virginia Distillery Company doesn't say that it had wine in it. It's just the type of cask that has like the staves of the barrel are like shaved down, which is really interesting. But it does say whiskey aged in these casks typically yields flavors of citrus, cherry, raspberry, plum, cocoa, and toasted pecan. From all of that, the plum for me is coming through the strongest.
I would agree with that. I could see a little bit of cocoa from the cigar side,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I just want to keep diving in. It's a good, again, I'm gonna say a blanket statement. I think this and the Lost Monarch are very similar pairings, not in terms of flavor 100%, but in terms of complexity, which is
Mm-hmm.
what I really enjoy in terms of pairings. I like having a pairing and being like, "Ooh, what's going on here?" It makes it fun. It's part of the hobby, part of what we do. And in that sense, I think both of these pairings are very playful, very fun, very experimental in a way.
Yeah, they both are. This episode, and just based on what our third whiskey is, I think it's going to be the same way. This is one of those where we could easily have a 1 hour long silent podcast where we just
Hmm.
keep tasting it and trying to figure out what's going on. There's a lot. These are both playing a lot, and there's little subtleties that are changing, and it's very interesting. It's very strange. Um, I agree with you about the cocoa and the cigar. Maybe you implanted that into my brain and made me a little bit biased. But when I went back to it, I was like, oh yeah, almost like a cocoa and a leather that definitely I didn't notice before.
Yeah, I think there's just so much play here. I think that's 100% the right term to use. Like we had approachable in the last podcast with the what was it, the foreign affairs last week. And in this one, sitting here, the playfulness is the term that I'm coming up with. This cigar is it just keeps coming to mind in terms of it's having some fun with these two. Now on the third one, I do agree that we're gonna have some complexity, but I do not think, because I took one small sip, coated my palate with it before the podcast here. I think it's gonna be a very different, not crazy different, but in terms of the sweetness, I think it's going to be different than these first two.
I think you're right. I think this next pairing is probably going to be very much, well, I could be wrong because sometimes they do things that you just don't expect. But I think it's going to be kind of a matter of preference because I think it's going to be a pretty unique pairing. I think it's going to be a little bit strange. So let's talk about pairing number 3. This is the one that we mentioned that might be a little bit difficult to get. This is Woodford Reserve's Master Select, the 2023 edition. And I brought up the info on this because there's no way I was going to remember all of it. So this is a unique blend of Woodford Reserve that has been finished in Sonoma County Pinot Noir, brandy, and former bourbon barrels used to age red wine. Let me unpack that sentence because that's a lot. So they blended together stuff that was aged in. There was 3 different types of barrels or casks. The first is Sonoma County Pinot Noir, so a Pinot Noir wine, that type of a barrel. And then the second was a brandy barrel. And then the third was a barrel that was formerly a bourbon barrel and then used to age red wine. So we've got all kinds of strange things going on with these barrels, giving this all kinds of interesting flavors. And I think we're in for a little bit of a treat. If you like finished bourbon, those listening, I've had one sip of this. I think you're going to like it because this has a really interesting flavor.
For those of you on the audio version, that's a good sign.
Right. Here's what I love. I haven't taken a puff of the cigar yet. Here's what I'm loving about this whiskey is it's so heavily finished that you might be a little bit worried you're not going to taste the bourbon at all. You do. You still taste the bourbon. It's weird. It comes through. It's oaky. It's got that just typical bourbon note. And then it's got all these finishes attached to it. That's really interesting.
And like everybody's had Woodford, right? Most people out there, if you're listening to this and you're on at least the whiskey side and probably even the cigar side, you've had Woodford. Now, the the interesting thing here is I think you're getting a little bit of that Woodford, so it's familiar in a way, and it helps. Again, this is coming from the whiskey noob. It helps you understand what finishes can do to a bourbon because it's familiar in a way, but then you're like, what is going on here? Because you're seeing that finish being different. So I know, I don't know if people can see, but I've got some Woodford up there, and I'm almost like maybe after this podcast, after we stop the air, I'll pour a little bit more of this if I finish it, and I'll pour a little bit of that Woodford, and I'll play with it with the cigar, and then I'll really begin to understand what's going on with the cask finish. And
Mm-hmm.
this may be a probably for the cigar noob side. This may be a little abrupt for people because every time I tell people this, they're like, "What?" It's the same thing if you want to really experience cigar flavors and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, every cigar tastes like tobacco, it tastes like earthiness, it tastes like a cigar, and that's something that is very common. Have two at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. Sounds crazy. Everybody's like, what? And I'm like, well, I get like I have more cigars than the average bear. I get that. But if you can, get some cigars, if you are in the perfect pairing club, let me know and maybe I'll toss you an extra one because you listened 30 minutes into this podcast. Uh, we'll little sneak peek for everybody that's actually in here. If you're in the perfect pairing club, I will send you an extra one, but you have to send me an email, just dreamercigars@gmail.com. But then you can experience two cigars at the same time and really be like, these are way different.
Mm-hmm.
These two things are not even close. I mean, even cigars that are close, I think last week's cigar, the Foreign Affairs, was
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't too much different than this cigar, but it's enough for me to be able to tell for sure, blanketly, night and day. But if you're not a big cigar guy, you may not see it. But if you smoke them together, you'll be like, this is, water and fire.
You're spot on, dude. That's actually how I learned to taste cigars. I came across that tip before, and I went to my local lounge. I got the lightest cigar I could find and the darkest cigar I could find. Because at that point, those two smoked separately were the same thing to me. And so I sat down and I smoked them together, and I was like, these are completely different. There's nothing similar between these two things, and it helped a ton.
Yeah, I mean it's the best way because if you smoke, say you smoke one cigar a month, right? You're not going to see it. There's so many variables
No.
that are playing between things. And it's the same with whiskey. It's why my palate is getting expanded here when we're going through this process because I'm getting 3 whiskeys in a sitting, which typically I'll have, I do typically have probably, a nightcap one out of every 2 nights maybe. And just to relax in the day or whatever, watching a show or whatever it is, just like a lot of people. But you're not paying attention. That's the other part. Most people, when
Yep.
they smoke cigars, if you're on the golf course, you're definitely not paying attention. You're with a bunch of buddies, you're not paying attention to the cigar. And if you are, you need to get new buddies because they're not, you should be having a good time with your friends. Like that's the way
Mm-hmm.
it should be. So, uh, little soapbox for Chris and I there, but I think it's important because I think that's the way you get to know both of these worlds.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of noobs listening, and I think that's easily my favorite tip for whiskey, and it sounds like it applies just the same to cigars. It can't be understated how helpful that is to do side by sides. It really is helpful. Now, that being said, this pairing
Mm.
is nothing if not interesting. I Maybe I'm biased. Maybe it's because I'm so excited about this whiskey that we're drinking. I think I'm getting some of those winey notes, some of those almost Pinot Noir notes in the cigar.
I am. No, you're 100% right. I almost didn't want to say it because I didn't want to be stupid on the on the whiskey side, but I'm like, there's a very wine forward, and it's what a very interesting trifecta we got here in pairings.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely wrong. I did not know there was a Pinot Noir side to this finish.
Mm-hmm.
These three, I mean, if you really want to get in intricate, have these three together with this cigar, this is an experience that is definitely more than any other trifecta pairing we've had with a single cigar. This is one that you could sit for hours and say,
Totally.
what is happening? You go back and forth and back and forth and 1 2 3 and then 3 2 1 and then 1 3. Like you could just experiment and have fun with this for a long time.
Yeah, this is really weird. And with these three, you get kind of a progression where the Lost Monarch doesn't have any of those wine finishes, doesn't have that special finish to it. So you get that whiskey flavor, like the whiskey characteristic. Then you move to the cuvee and you've got this like added bit of like a plum and like a dark fruit. And then you move to the Woodford and it's like full on wine. Like you've got this just wine flavor that somehow made it over to the cigar. I don't think I've ever puffed a cigar in my life and thought that kind of tastes like wine. I am right now with this pairing. It's totally weird.
How many times have you paired cigars and wine?
I don't know if I ever have. Maybe once. Maybe once.
That explains it. I am a big fan of that pairing.
Okay.
I do like a nice wine and cigar pairing. Um, I was a wine drinker before I was a whiskey drinker for sure.
Okay.
That like in the phases, you're college and you just drink light beer and you're just whatever. Or whatever.
Yeah.
I went wine after college and then I went whiskey and then I went tequila and now tequila is still number one. I'm sorry, I'll say it. All the whiskey guys out there are gonna hate me. Tequila is still my number one. Some Don Julio 1942 Añejo, beautiful with the cigar. I actually had it for the first time last weekend when we were in Dallas launching our Dennis Rodman cigar. It was what a crazy pairing. Anyways, yeah, this whole thing, I'm very intrigued to go back through. That's all I'm really trying to get across here. I'm so excited to go back through, and I wish we could just hit pause. And John, you can just like sit here and just cut and just like
Right.
John's the
Totally
editor. If you guys
agreed.
haven't been clear, he's the behind the camera man that puts this
Yeah.
whole thing together. He's the guy that makes us look pretty and not stupid.
Yeah, we actually look way worse before he does the post production on this. So
We're
he's got a hard
actually-
job.
Yeah, we actually have totally different hair. I don't even have a beard at all, and I actually
Yeah.
have a mustache. He's really good at AI. No, I'm just
Yeah. Right. I'll give you a second to go back through that. I haven't had the chance to yet, but I will explain. I know there's probably somebody listening who heard me butcher the definition of cuvee cask, and so I'm gonna explain specifically what it is. And there's a part of it that I don't know, at least for this whiskey, so I'll have to look into that a little bit deeper. But a cuvee cask is actually when they take a barrel or a cask that previously had something in it. They shave down the char off of it, off of the barrel that was already charred once, and then they re-toast it and briefly re-char it and then use that again. It's called a cuvee. And so I don't know what was aged in this. I would guess a wine because, cuvee is originally a wine term. So that's probably why we're getting those winey notes from the cuvee cask as well. But that's what a cuvee cask is. And it's given me some of those dark fruit notes, some of those almost berry notes. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it was funny. I just hit that right before you said dark fruit. While I'm going back through the Redwood Empire, by the way, was a lot different going back. There's a lot of stuff on our palates right now, but
I totally agree.
That was crazy different. Then the dark fruit, like when you go from that Lost Monarch, now that we have the expectations in our head, you go back to that courage and conviction, and it's just like a giant burst of I'm like thinking like dark cherry.
Mm-hmm.
Like a really I don't there's red cherries and then there's like purple. You know what I mean? Like is it black
Yes.
Is it black cherry that I'm thinking of?
I think so. I'm totally with you here. Yep.
Like it's just like and it's weird because it's not like grape. It's not that dark wine like a heavy cab. It's not like that. It's really like dark cherry, a black cherry. And what a yeah. I mean,
It
just yeah. Go ahead. I'm just
no
like
s that no that that cherry note you're talking about. It reminded me a touch of almost almond as well, which together is reminding me of like an amaretto. It's like, but with more cherry than a normal amaretto,
yeah.
but it's a little bit like that. So when you said cherry immediately, because I was already thinking like amaretto, and you said the cherry, and I was like, yes, like that's what that's reminding me of, 100%.
I know we've said this before, but this is and this is not an exaggeration for those of you listening and watching. This is the hardest rankings I've ever had in this podcast thus far on the 100 that we've had thus far.
Totally agreed. I thought it was going to be easy, and I went back to that Lost Monarch, and I don't know if it's because we're farther into the cigar. I don't know what's causing it. It tastes totally different, and maybe we're almost pairing the whiskeys together now because like the Lost Monarch
Yeah.
is almost fruity now. It's I would I'm I don't normally recommend you try all three of the things that we're drinking right now, but if you can try them with this cigar,
Yeah.
this is so interesting.
This is such a game. I mean, we are not exaggerating for any sort of entertainment reason right now. These three, you could just go back and forth between the three, just play with them so much with this cigar. Just, it's really, I mean, the truthfulness of the whole thing, it's a really enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
This whole process.
And it's so hard to convey it to you guys sometimes because I know that it would seem like, oh, of course you guys are going to agree. But if you've been listening, you know that we disagree sometimes. And you've said like multiple things that have been like reading my mind. Like I took a sip of the Lost Monarch and I was like, that's a totally different whiskey right now. And then you said that and I'm like, yes, like 100%.
See, there are some absolute truths in this game, guys. And when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to pairings, there are things that we can work off of. It's not just like I went live earlier today as kind of a pre-podcast live because I had some time, and somebody said, "What cigar brand goes best with whiskey?" And I was like, "That is such a hard. That's an impossible question to answer because
Mm-hmm.
well, first of all, with whiskey, all whiskeys are so, there's so many intricacies. What cigar brand? Uh, I can tell you Davidoff. Davidoff has the lightest Anniversario, Connecticut cigars on the planet. And they've also got the late hour that's going to hit you in the mouth. Like you can't, I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you guys this is what you should smoke and this is what you should drink, but it's just not that simple. But we're here to try and make it just a little simpler than it already is with you just throwing your hands up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. It's way too complex to to recommend something like that. And I did jot down my rankings to try to keep myself honest. This was a hard one though. This was a hard one. I think I have them. I'll go first
You,
if you'd like.
I was gonna say you go ahead and go first. I'm between two right now. They're competing,
Okay.
so you go ahead.
This is going to come out in the rankings too. So let me be very clear. These all three are like high level pairings. And I'm not just saying that to say that. Like, truly, these are all three like really good pairings. I have in third place, just barely, I have Lost Monarch. And I think that is a biased reason for that. I love a wine finish. I love those winey notes in a whiskey. And I think that's the only reason that it comes in third, because in a different episode with different whiskeys, as you'll see with my rating, this could be a first place. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got Lost Monarch in third. Above that, I've got the Cuvée cask. And then my favorite for sure is the Woodford Masters Select.
Whew. So I've got a little difference.
That's fine.
A little difference. I'm still deciding on the numbers here. I mean, literally, they may be, point 1, point 2, point 3 here, like different, like in terms of the ratings. I've
Yeah.
I've got the Courage and Conviction in third, which feels so wrong to say.
Right.
It feels so wrong to say. Like, I, what I want to emphasize here is it's not in last place. It got the bronze medal in the Olympics.
Right.
Like, that's
Right.
the difference here. Like, this got third place, not last place. The third is
Hmm.
not far from first. That's the basic way I can say it. I've got Redwood Empire, the Lost Monarch in second. I think what it came down to for me was the whiskey and how it played with the cigar rather than just a pure pairing, because it is incredibly, if you give me any of these, I'm done. I'm good.
Hmm.
Yes. Like, no hesitation. I'm not saying they're all above nines here. I'm not going to reveal that yet. But what I'm saying is, I am not going to be mad. I'm actually going to give you a fist bump and a hug if you've
Yep.
got this pairing for me. Like, that's like whatever it is, that's what it is. And but the Woodford, I agree with you at first. I think it's just the complexity. That wine finish is so awesome. The familiarity between the Woodford for me was really cool. Like, that experience was number one.
Yep. Yeah, and one more thing I have to add to that is kudos to this cigar because these are three super different whiskeys that we're pairing right now, and they're all fantastic. Like, I'm racking my brain thinking what might be bad with this, and the only thing I can think is if you were too mellow. Like, maybe if you were too mellow, it wouldn't play with the cigar quite enough.
I'm
But
not sure.
these are all pairing beautifully with this cigar.
Maybe if you went like Fireball, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, that might not be good. Yeah.
That's how crazy we're going here. I'll start off with the ratings here because I know we're again almost overtime. We've had 2 weeks in a row now where I feel like there's just been so much play and so much kind of to talk about here. So I'm gonna start in the beginning. The Redwood Empire. I'm going 8.4.
Yep. All
I'm
right.
going.
I'm almost right with you. I'm at 8.7. Yep.
It's just it's a great pairing. That's like all I can say. There's better out there. I've seen it, so I gave it the 8.4, and I feel like crazily enough, which will reveal the rest of my ratings, I do believe there is something out there that is better than what we've had today, just because of how crazy these three were.
Mm-hmm.
Because these are three not random really, but kind of random whiskeys that we just had. There's a plethora of other whiskeys out there. But moving along, courage and conviction, which was my number three, is sitting right at 8.3.
Okay. Yeah. So they're right on top of each other.
I almost gave them both 8.4. I almost just said a tie, but I didn't do it in the rankings, so that's
Fair
if
enough.
they're point one away, guys, just do it. Just try it.
Right. And you can see here how we're like, yeah, it doesn't sound right to say any of these is in third because these are great pairings. For the courage and conviction, that one for me was a little bit higher than the Lost Monarch. I went with 8.8, which my Lost Monarch was at 8.7, to be clear. So
Same, yep.
right on top of each other.
We're on the same level. I mean, yeah, it's 1A, 1B, 1C. Now, when
Yeah.
it comes to the Woodford Reserve, the Sonoma Triple Finish, I win a 9 flat.
Okay.
So 9 flat, I think I would never blink. But again, I think it's because all three were so good that I'm almost like, it's almost a skepticism where I'm like, there's there's no way we found like the three best pairings out there for this cigar randomly, but it's possible. It would just be like, it's almost like if I could adjust it later based off of me having a bunch of other ones, then it may happen. Maybe it would be 9.5. But right
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like, it's so hard to tell between these three.
Yeah, so for me, with the Woodford, I had to go with 9.5 actually. What you just mentioned, it there was a moment where I was going back and forth with it, and I was like, this to me is like I can't even explain to you. It was just like this is a pairing that I could have every week and I would be thrilled with it every week. Like I'm genuinely like I'm buying more of these cigars and I'm going to try to get my hands on a bottle of this Woodford, and that is like the pairing for me. There's almost nothing I would change about it. 9.5 might be my highest rating so far. I can't picture very much being better than that. And maybe, like you said, though, this cigar's good with a lot of stuff. Maybe it's the opposite for me. I would try more and bring that down a little bit. But right now, this
That's
is
fair.
like hitting perfectly.
I mean, guys, just to take our ratings and rankings for what you want. Just do it all. Find it, do it like that. I don't know. That's because this whole point is trying to just help people find stuff, guys. We found it. We found three of them. Just do it.
And at the end of the day, that's what the perfect pairing club is for. It's so that you can then just do that. You can try it. You can see what we liked about each of these and say, okay, now I think I'm going to try this instead because they liked that, and see what you think. And truly,
100%.
one last thing before I get to our trivia to compare to our last Lost Monarch. You are absolutely correct. This paired significantly better with the Lost Monarch. We previously had 6.4 for you and 4.9 for me. And this time around, we've got
For me.
8.4 for you and 8.7 for me. So just goes to show there aren't usually we're selecting the whiskeys and the cigars that we're having on this podcast. We're usually not having a bad whiskey or a bad cigar. We just have bad pairings. Sometimes they just don't go together very well. But when you
Yeah.
get the right pairing, they're excellent.
Yep. That's a great example. I figured I couldn't remember it. That's so cool. Now I want to go have the Nika Reserva, and I
Right.
want to have this cigar, and I want to have the Redwood Empire, because that's how you learn. Like it's what we were getting into. Like I want to be like, wow, like here's the two cigars. It's the opposite of what we're doing here. You grab one whiskey, two cigars, and you're like, oh my gosh, this whiskey is doing so many different things to these different cigars.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reverse, and maybe we'll have to do like one episode. It'll be a special. Maybe we'll do it like around the end of the year or something, where we'll flip it.
That would be super cool. We can maybe pick like our highest ranking whiskey from the year and then do a special where we do multiple cigars with that whiskey. That would be super cool.
That would be
I will
cool.
reveal the trivia for you guys who are on the edge of your seat right now. What proof does a bourbon, scotch, and Irish whiskey need to be considered one of those whiskeys? Adam nailed it. It is 40% ABV or 80 proof. It's very common across a lot of whiskeys, you will see. So if you see something that is less than that, read the label carefully. It might be like flavored whiskey product or something like that, or it might be diluted whiskey, but it's not whiskey. It's not bourbon or scotch or Irish whiskey. It could be some other weird category. There's like American whiskey specialty, stuff like that, or specialty spirit, I believe, but it's not one of those main categories I just mentioned.
Well, that feels good, everybody. Thank you for listening. I mean, I just got to say, I want to thank God for this achievement of getting this right. I want to thank my family, my wife for supporting me along this cigar and whiskey journey. There's nothing else to say. Of course, you guys already know if you want 10% off the Perfect Pairing Club, PPP10, but I don't have a mic, so, well, I do. So, Chris, cheers, man. Mic drop right here. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.